Hi, we'd like to extend our stay.
And upgrade.
Hey residents, welcome back to Hoteler 360. I'm Ari.
And I'm Lexi. Thank you so much for tuning in to our latest installment of the agriculture season.
I am like 99% sure that most of you listening have heard that eating meat is single-handedly killing the planet or something to that effect. And Lex, to start us off, hard-hitting questions. What's your take on meat production as an environmental and ethical hazard?
Thanks for pulling the pin as you just like throw a grenade of a question at, 8:24 in the morning? Wow. Yeah, no, that's a sticky question. I think that my high level answer is everyone would do their planet, their fellow man, and animals a favor by consuming less meat. Like 1, 2, 3, 4 days less a week, no meat. All that definitely goes without question. But between today and I think next week, we'll really be wading through the ethical and climate issues associated with meat production, huh?
That we will. And honestly, it wouldn't be the agriculture season if we didn't discuss today's hot topic, meat production, and its real effect on the environment and what we can do to make it better. This particular subject has been at the forefront of many paradigm shift conversations that I've had in the last 10 plus years that I've been studying and working in the environmental science industry. I'm sure it's similar for you.
Oh yeah.
It's been
even before that. Like
yeah.
I remember when Obama's administration was happening, that was like a big topic of conversation. I will not say how old I was, but I will give it away by saying I was in freaking middle school and people were talking about this. So,
well,
yeah.
Remember my introduction to veganism was in 2007 with my aunt.
Yeah.
Like that was the first time when I started hearing some of these conversations.
Wow, that's the same time. Dude, that's literally the same time. Obama was elected in 2008.
Yeah. Yeah.
Whoa.
I mean, it was, you were definitely not in middle school.
What a coincidence. Yet. No, I was. He had just
in
gotten elected.
2007?
No. He was elected in 2008. Sorry, now we're just kind of rambling.
Yeah, okay, anyway.
He was elected in 2008. I was in middle school. Anyways, been a conversation for a long time. Go.
Yeah, it's been talked about everywhere. But in case you're lost, let me just catch you up really quick.
In case you missed the last 2 decades.
In case you, yeah, literally. What are we in? We're in 2026 now? Yeah, she's right. Oh my God, 2007 was 2 decades ago.
19 years, yeah.
I have a problem with that information. Oh God. As we mentioned earlier in the season, the global agriculture industry is responsible for somewhere between 19 and 29% of global greenhouse gas emissions. Yikes. Yikes. And meat and dairy production makes up a large portion of that, particularly the greenhouse gas methane. So livestock, which is the meat and dairy industry and production, is the heavyweight, accounting for 32% of all human-caused methane globally. And, let's not beat around the bush. That's a lot. That's a lot. For our visual learners, if the global meat and dairy industry were a country, it would be the 3rd largest emitter in the world, trailing only China and the US. And those are not countries you want to be close to on the whole emissions data front. In fact, the combined emissions of just the top 45 meat and dairy companies are higher than the entire reported emissions of Saudi Arabia, one of the world's largest oil producers.
There is a report that was published in 2025, and we'll link it in the show notes, that details the staggering effect that the meat and dairy industry has on the climate. It also has some, the report itself also has some ethical concerns that it calls out, obviously. But it's called Roasting the Planet, Big Meat and Dairy's Big Emissions. This report was co-authored by Food Rise, Friends of the Earth US, Greenpeace Nordic, and I think Institute for Agriculture and Trade Policy, excuse me.
Mm-hmm.
One of the companies this report covers is JBS, and that is the largest meat corporation in the world. So you might be wondering, gee, just how big is the world's largest meat operation? Annually, every year, JBS slaughters an estimated 3.6 billion chickens, 38.8 million pigs, and 20.8 million cattle. Relevant here is that this report states that JBS, the largest meat corporation, actually emitted more methane than ExxonMobil and Shell combined in 2023. Now, we often think of oil rigs as the methane villains, or even natural gas outfits as the methane villains. And they are, don't get us wrong, but the global supply chain of beef is operating at a similar atmospheric scale and gets no shade, or at least substantially less. I know personally I'm not bringing it up as frequently as I probably should be.
Neither am I.
And not only that, but the report details how this industry has spent hundreds of millions lobbying against climate action since the early 2000s, which, if that reminds you of another industry, aka the fossil fuel industry, yeah, you're correct. And that's just the emissions part of the conversation. We are going to dive in today to the serious soil, land use, other degradation issues, monstrous water consumption problems. And it's no wonder why, among many environmentalists and similar communities, that the narrative to slow down the effects of climate change and global resource exploitation has widely been to, quote, stop eating meat. Today, we're taking a deeper look at this narrative. Maybe it's not the cow, but the how. If you caught our last episode, also hats off, madame, good phrase to coin. If you caught our last episode, we spoke a bit about our conversation with Aaron Gilliam, a grazing specialist doing active land restoration in Sonoma County, California. You'll be hearing from him quite a bit in today's episode, as our conversation with him was rich with information on today's meat topic. And also, he put up with me for a 3-hour interview. So if we didn't include a lot of it, I think he might not speak to me again, because that was probably grueling. But he was such a good sport. And as you'll see, he had nothing but good things to say. It was actually really hard to choose what specifically to include.
Yeah, brilliant mind. So glad we got to tap into that.
Yes,
resource, so to speak.
Yeah, but his whole job focuses on restoring land using natural animal grazing and migratory patterns, and he was gracious enough to actually show me one of the land plots that he works in this process. It was phenomenal. Animals moving across land in patterns that mimic natural grazing can actually improve soil health, and their hooves aerate the soil. Their manure feeds soil microbes, and when managed well, it's not livestock versus soil health, it's livestock for soil health. How we manage our livestock doesn't end there, of course. We have a long way to go and many kinks to work out, putting it gently. So let's get real about meat and methane and what kind of change this industry really needs.
So, the way the livestock production, let's not. Okay, sorry, Lizzie. Again, from the top.
livestock.
The livestock production.
It's gonna be huge, buffalo. Huge.
The livestock. Yeah. Okay. The way livestock production operates currently.
Weirdos.
Dude, the Italians love my Donald Trump impersonation, even though, like, if they knew real, like, American accents, they would know how terrible it is. But the Italians eat it up. Happy to provide some laughs and giggles for them. The way livestock production operates currently, and by that we mean with the standard of industrial level production, the industry of meat and dairy accounts for 32% of all human-caused methane globally. If you're confused about the difference between industrial agriculture and other forms we should be shifting toward, please go listen to our last 2 episodes to get caught up. We break it down for you very nicely with interview clips from some of the incredible farmers and industry professionals we got to speak with. So go tune into those.
And we'll see you back here when you're done.
Mm-hmm. But it also accounts for approximately 80% of all global agricultural land. This footprint includes both the land used for direct grazing and the arable land dedicated to growing animal feed. This is one of the most overlooked stats. I'm going to say it again. 80% of global agricultural land allocated to livestock and the meat
It's food.
and dairy industry. Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So while this represents nearly half of the world's habitable land, it provides only about 18% of global calories. We need to talk about
That is staggering. Yeah.
We need to, this needs to be discussed. That's a huge discrepancy in land use and ability and food access, honestly. Most U.S. monoculture commodities, soy and corn, that we've discussed ad nauseum in the previous 2 episodes, aren't even for human consumption. I mean, they are, of course, a part of it, but most of it is actually used for livestock feedlots and biofuels. And then there's the water problem. The livestock industry uses approximately 20% to 33% of all global freshwater resources. While roughly 70% of total global freshwater is withdrawn for agriculture, between 24% and 32% of that agricultural water is dedicated specifically to raising livestock and growing their feed. Guys, if I haven't made this clear, that is absolutely insane. So it's clear why many argue for eating less meat, because we not only cut down on emissions, but we'd be able to use arable land to feed people instead of just cows that we're literally just raising for meat products and for slaughter, and delegate our freshwater better. And here's a reminder from Erin Gilliam, a grazing specialist and land steward with the Sonoma Mountain Land Institute, who we introduced in episode 2 of this agriculture podcast series, that it's not just about the animal. When considering regenerative meat production, it goes beyond that.
You sort of talked about this earlier when you were describing how the cow, I shouldn't say cows, I learned what that means earlier. When you're bringing the cattle, I'll just say broadly, through, they're eating and drinking what is here, getting what they need from the land. So my question is, in terms of land and water usage, how does this project differ from other projects where maybe it is more sustainable, but they're bringing in outside food resources and water is not necessarily from the land?
There are hybrid food production operations that are in part farming and in part ranching, farming being that like you're preparing the soil, you're planting the seed, you're applying nutrients, and you are applying water. Sometimes water is falling naturally from the sky at the same time you'd want stuff to grow. But you're managing uh, the water as far as drainage, or applying it as irrigation. And those, you're also trying to keep out other things from eating the forage with fences or other deterrents. And those fall into farming operations. And so like farming hay of various types often then is then it's brought into a more wild or a more ranching space, broad acreage land management. And so it becomes a hybrid operation. And that's just a difference, not necessarily bad, but what you have to do is say, when you're analyzing the benefits and the cost benefit analysis of a ranching operation that does a lot of that, you should be analyzing you should be doing the same thing for all of their inputs too. So say they're getting grain from Iowa or they're getting hay from Oregon. When you're analyzing that ranch's impact, say its environmental impact in its place, you've got to look beyond just that ranch and say, okay, well, that's great for how you're managing your watershed, great, and the soil looks like it's well and protected, and you got all this diversity happening. You're doing a great job. But if they're dependent on a bunch of hay, then you should go to the hay places and be like, and how is it working here? Can you grow hay in a way that allows for all this diversity of species to also exist there? Or is there actually a shadow hay operation that is, killing every last non-alfalfa plant with herbicides that's then running into the creek? Is it, pesticide killing all of the ground burrowing animals and the deers or whatever? Is there like a shadow hay operation that you wouldn't be proud of? Or is there a hay operation that you're like, wow, that's a way of doing hay that in that place is also very appropriate and respectful of that local ecology? Same thing with the grain from Iowa. Like there are ways of growing grain that are more in tune with that place. They're appropriate for that place. And they are doing it in a way that allows for a diversity of species to coexist and is respectful of the water and the watershed. And there are ways of doing it that aren't.
When we were preparing this season, I remember one of the notes we got back from the folks giving us feedback was we should talk about rice. And I think maybe at least I was like, why the hell would we talk about, part of my language, why the hell would we talk about rice when we're talking about meat and methane? And it came as a surprise, like cows aren't the only substantial source of methane in agriculture. Rice accounts for 10 to 12% of global methane emissions, making it one of the largest agricultural sources. Obviously not as big as the livestock industry.
Sure.
But, it's worth calling out that there are other large emitters. These emissions, totaling around 39.3 million metric tons annually, result from anaerobic bacteria in the flooded paddies. And we've been tossing around this concept of methane being bad for climate, but we haven't actually talked about like why that is. So to demonstrate just how bad, methane is a significant driver of climate change, trapping 80 times more heat than CO2, than carbon dioxide, that thing that we're all, trying to get in the Paris Climate Agreement, but I'll digress, over the last 20 years. Now, it's worth doing a little side-by-side comparison here. Rice provides 20% of global calories. And you might be saying to yourself, right, Lexi, but Ari just said that meat provides 18%. Like, shouldn't these things be a one-to-one comparison? Like, you're not telling me that you're trying to cancel rice the same way that you're not trying to tell me you're trying to cancel meat. Right. I'm not. neither of us are trying to tell you to cancel rice, because rice only uses 10% of the world's arable land. Let me repeat that. It uses 10% of the world's arable land for rice cultivation, whereas the livestock production uses 80%. So no, we're not suggesting to cancel rice, and we're honestly not necessarily suggesting that we cancel meat production, right? But reducing methane in rice production can be achieved. It has to do with limiting the time the fields are flooded, and that stops the methane producing microbes. A key method to reduce methane in rice production is alternate wetting and drying. This can lead to a 50% reduction in emissions. That's huge. Now, Ari, speaking of reduction in emissions and bringing us back to the livestock of it all, doesn't that method remind you of something?
Let me think. Oh yeah, crop rotation.
Yes. Yes. AKA one of the pillar concepts in regenerative agriculture that we mentioned last episode. It's the bigger concept between all of these things that we're talking about is incorporating biomimicry in now livestock production, like using cattle in crop rotation practices and natural grazing techniques, which can actually be quite beneficial to soil and thereby crop health, which is another big issue we highlighted, I believe, either last week or the week before, but we've definitely talked about this.
And we're gonna talk about it more today for sure. And like Lexi said earlier, the dairy industry is contributing to these numbers too. It makes sense why the alternative milks market has literally exploded since the mid 2010s. But what is constantly brought up is how much water plant-based milk uses. So let's compare and contrast water usage impacts. Just real quick.
Let's lay the rumors to rest.
Just because, there's those girls who are thinking they're really doing something by going to Starbucks and getting their almond frappuccino or whatever.
But also there's the people, I feel like, oh, that's interesting. We have a nice juxtaposition here. I feel like I've heard you're going the almond milk path. Whoa. Okay, maybe I digress a little. I'll get off your tail feathers a smidge. I'll just say everybody who's a hater on alternative milks and being like, they're not that good for the planet. Sure, but they're also not necessarily worse than dairy milk.
Oh, yeah. But look, as if we can give you guys any advice in this session here, in this episode today, a lot of it actually has to just come down to how was it grown? Like, how was it produced? Okay? Because you can have dairy milk produced with a lot more impact than oat milk, and you can have oat milk produced and processed in a way that could have a worse. I mean, oat milk actually not really.
Yeah,
anyway,
oat milk is not the hater.
Almond is a better example. Anyway, but what is constantly brought up is how much water plant-based milk uses. So let's compare and contrast water usage impacts. Okay?
Let's do it.
Dairy milk. Let's start with the OG got milk girlfriend, okay? Dairy milk. The hidden water cost here is actually massive because you aren't just, watering a cow, okay? You are watering the massive fields of alfalfa and corn that cow eats. So, yeah, it takes roughly 600 liters of water to produce 1 liter of dairy. Y'all listening, class? Next.
Spooky.
Yeah. Spooky.
Bad.
Not always bad. Bad about how it's produced,
Thank you.
But that's just some facts. Almond milk. Let's go to almond milk. This is a fan favorite. I have a hot take on almond milk, but I'm just going to leave that. I'm going to let Tucker tell you what to think about almonds. But almond milk, dubbed the thirsty alternative, It takes about 370 liters of water for 1 liter of almond milk. And while this is better than dairy, if you compare the resources and resource intensity, almonds are almost exclusively grown in drought-prone California, making their water footprint more ecologically sensitive. So stay tuned in a couple minutes. We're going to have Tucker Garrison speak about this particular topic. But for now, let's move on to rice milk. A silent water hog, as I like to call it, because rice paddies are kept flooded and it requires about 270 liters per liter of milk. Again, not nearly as much as the 600 liters of water it takes to produce dairy milk, but still a lot. It's worth knowing the numbers, okay?
Yeah. And this is also just taking a look at one singular comparable
Metric.
aspect
Yep.
of these milks, and that's their water usage.
We're only looking at water usage right now, exactly. Finally, oat milk. This one is the clear winner as far as water usage goes. It only requires about 48 liters, nearly 13 times less than dairy, to produce 1 liter of oat milk. Clear winner as far as water usage goes.
Yeah, easy.
The only thing I want to say here, just really quick, is I know oat milk has like exploded in the last couple years.
Yes.
Just like environmentally, yes, it's quite sound. Just like it can be super processed, like all alternative milks can. So just everyone be wary of like, are you actually getting just oat?
Just oat.
Like
oat and water.
Oat and water.
Maybe
like,
a little salt.
I mean, those brands, I don't like Oatly and like the Silk brands, like for oat milk, like guys, just look at the ingredients, please.
Always double check the ingredients when you're buying something.
So here we'd like to add something to keep in mind from Tucker Garrison, who is a superfoods expert and co-founder of Imlakesh Organics, a company bridging the gap between indigenous knowledge and Western food and farming practices by supplying high-quality organic, sustainably harvested foods while providing living wages and socioeconomic opportunities for small farmers. We've introduced him in previous episodes of this season, but here he just reminds us to dive a little deeper when we're making food choices.
This is where this kind of gets into an interesting question, though. Let's take almonds, right? I live in California. We're the largest producer of almonds in the world. And they're not that far away from me. 100 miles, probably. For me, they're 100, 200 miles. There's a lot of almonds. They are the model, which I will not describe in full again, is a bunch of perfect rows of exactly the same tree, which is being sprayed with pesticides, which is being sprayed with herbicides, which is being flooded with nitrogen fertilizer, which is all running into the waterways. And they're pumping an ancient aquifer of water that's tens of thousands of years old. The ground is literally dropping in order to produce this thing, which is like deeply and incredibly unsustainable and like degenerative to the ecology. So like this is where like these things are not as simple as like just eat local and do this. Whereas you take something like Sach Inchi that comes from Thailand or Peru, right? And it's like, okay, it came from far away, but it requires no rainwater. It is fed only by rainwater. There's no irrigation, right? It's supporting native people and small scale farmers. It's actually supporting the soil and ecology. It's completely organic. There's no pesticides, herbicides, or anything being sprayed on it. And it has 2 times the protein of an almond. It has 8 times the omega-3s of salmon. It's a complete protein. And it's delicious. It tastes like a peanut and macadamia that had a baby. Like it's like so much nutritionally superior and agriculturally superior than an almond. So I think what I would come back to is like support local businesses, support small scale agriculture, support farm stands and those people. And then after that, like start to look at like, okay, like what companies do I trust that are outside of that and start working with them? Because just going, oh, the almonds are close. It's like, it's not working.
So yeah, obviously, when it comes to other resources like land usage and CO2 or methane emissions, dairy milk still takes the cake for most exploitative, with rice possibly being a close second.
Yeah, funny how that shakes out. But this is the regenerative caveat. Industrial dairy land is typically dead soil. So it's dirt, dust, non-arable land that can't grow much of anything. And to come alive again, if that's even possible, as we highlighted in, believe, last week or 2 weeks ago's episode, the land needs inputs like the ones that we had discussed. But regenerative dairy, like using managed grazing, can actually improve the land. Compared to an industrial almond orchard, which is more like a biological desert for bees and local wildlife due to heavy pesticide use and like just what it takes to grow a crop the way that we currently do for yield, we've kind of gone over all of that. That in mind, compare that to a managed grazing dairy. Technically, the managed grazing dairy promotes more biodiversity for pollinators and wildlife and is better for the soil, as we have sort of like previewed, highlighted here. And it really comes down to what you've been saying, Ari, this paradigm shift in how we're approaching the industry. Rather than using all of these high production individual systems for each product on the market, we could be transitioning to a model that is more circular, mimicking nature, using crop and field rotation, and natural grazing methods using cattle, thus producing high quality meat and dairy while also restoring the land and producing high quality food all at the same time. It's the dream, really.
It is my dream. I
Yeah.
hope everyone shares this dream. But talking about this, working on this season, talking about this with you even again today, it's funny. We've spent a decade at least debating which milk is better for the planet. But I really do think, given our newfound kind of knowledge, that this is the wrong focus. And I understand why we tend to put focus on individual things like this, okay? Like, we also have done it, and we still do it to an extent. Like, thank goodness we did the research for this season to, like, broaden how we approach food and the agriculture industry. But I do think it's the wrong focus. It's not nothing that if we switched to oat milk, we'd save 90% of the water. Okay, we need to acknowledge that. But if we fixed the way we manage dairy cows, we could turn that emissions problem into a soil health solution.
Yeah.
So the question isn't just, what are you drinking? Okay, it's what kind of landscape are you funding? It's a comprehensive solution. It's not binary. It's not an either or. It's really like a concept approach question.
Yeah. 100%.
Here, I'm gonna start transitioning to meat specifically again, like away from dairy and meat again. And we need to also acknowledge the growing popularity of like impossible meat or beyond meat. So these kinds of meat replacements. And I mean, you guys are here listening to Ari and Lexi for also the hot takes and the opinions. Do not even get me started on these two. Like, okay, yeah, we need to clear something up. We need to clear something up right now. Yeah, I'm gonna hate for a couple seconds. We need to clear something up. Don't even get me started on impossible or beyond meat. These often rely on glyphosate-heavy GMO. Hello. GMO soy. What is glyphosate? Roundup, guys. We talked about it in either last week or the week before. It's Roundup. Gross. Glyphosate-heavy GMO soy product processed and like squished into this like plastic meat product. Disgusting. More packaged, processed, industrial agriculture slop. Okay? That is not the answer. Try lentils if you're trying. This may be like a Middle Eastern kind of bias, but bro, try some yellow split peas, try some
Ooh.
lentils. If you're trying to cut back on meat, you know what? I can even share some awesome Middle Eastern recipes that are high protein and low impact on our Substack. You know, we're going to start collaborating with my really good friend Emil, who he runs the Good Forchetta, which if you guys don't know, this is a kind of like it's a cooking and it's a cooking page that tries to work with the seasons. It's a lot of Italian inspired food, but maybe he and I can do a collaboration. We can get some lentil recipes and Middle Eastern like legume recipes out there for you guys.
That'd be sick. I would tune
But,
into that.
I hope you would. You better. Like, what? At least my co-host should check that out. So yeah, just on the whole impossible meat or beyond meat of it all, you might be saving a cow in your mind, but you are still funding a system that kills soil biology and insects through chemical runoff. So for me, not an option. Next.
And I will say, like, while we might not particularly subscribe to that as an alternative, if we're going to like not have meat but have something meat-like, that's not to say it isn't an option still. Again, reducing our meat consumption is necessary. And if you like those alternative meat brands and you're cool with how they're produced and what they've got going on, go for it. It's not the solution, but it is part of the options available to us. And Ari, I hear you. But what about lab-grown meat? Like, it's surely worth mentioning this up-and-coming option on the market. Like, aside from the ones that maybe are a little bit more mainstream, I have friends who have worked at startups that are doing other, I'll call them meat alternatives. And the biggest selling point, which is convincing or persuasive to me, is the elimination of methane belching cows. And that's right. You heard it here first. It's not the farts. It's their belching. Anyways.
The methane belching cows. Oh, I love that.
It's their burps. Justice for cows.
Justice for the burps.
And let's sort of go through the pros, the cons, and the reality of it all. So the pro, lab meat produces near zero methane. Okay, cool. Since methane is a potent short-term warmer, this is like an immediate win. The con, a 2023 study from University of California, Davis, suggested that the carbon footprint of cultivated meat could be 4 to 25 times higher than retail beef if pharmaceutical grade growth media is used. So that's not swell. It really is coming to how the sausage is made, so to speak.
Literally.
And the reality, okay? The reality is replacing short-lived methane with long-lived CO2 this is from the massive energy needed to run the bioreactors required for production, might actually be worse for the planet in the long run. So now, remember how earlier we were like, okay, we're zooming in on water, now we're zooming in on methane, and we're zooming in on land use. Like, a lot of we're being myopic, and I think that is like a human condition. We're being myopic. We're really focusing in on like very pointed issues. But this conversation of the pros, the cons, and the reality is sort of showing us the more holistic view that we need to be considering when making our food purchases, because we can't look at these things necessarily in a vacuum. Like the energy it takes to grow something, the water it takes to grow something, the land it takes to grow something, all of these are factors you take into consideration as you're making your choices. Some of them are obviously better than others. as
Mm-hmm.
we've kind of like pointed out. But Aaron thinks lab grown meat could have potential for the ever present meat products demand, but we need to carefully weigh the option against feedlots. And here he is on that point.
I do think that there's an interesting challenge that may be fulfilled by lab grown meat. And here's that challenge. The Midwest, deep soils, flat, easily, managed. I can't say easy because I don't know what it's like to manage there, but I do know that, dealing with flat topography is physically easier than the topography of the mountains. So you got flat, you got deep soils, you got summer rain mixed with long sunny days. Super productive plains. It used to be tall grass prairies, mid and short grass prairies, and just incredibly abundant. Now it may be largely farms, but you still have this abundant situation, but not much of a population to take advantage of it. So it makes a lot of sense. How do you get the photosynthetic productivity of the Midwest out to the coasts where there's more populations? Well, prior to roads and fences, you could have animals that would eat the productivity that was naturally just occurring there in the prairies and the savannas, eat it, and walk them on their hooves with that solar, energy in their bodies towards where the markets were. Can't do that anymore, right? And even then, like, it may not be a voyage that would make sense. Okay, well, so then, you keep the animals where the people, closer to the people, you grow forage there and you harvest that, say, the prairie. You mow the prairie. It still has all sorts of diversity that it's supporting. You mow that prairie and you pack it up and you bring it to the animals. So that's bringing it to the animals. How? In a truck? Well, not only is that a lot of weight you're transporting, but it's diesel dependent. And so now it's got an extra cost to it. Okay. So we're not going to do that. You're transporting too much weight. It's not efficient. Well, where can you get the biggest bang for your buck if you're going to transport the productivity from this place to where the population is? Well, the seed heads. The highest energy in that plant is all packed into the seed head. So just harvest the seeds, leave the bulk, the heavy bulk there. Just take the highest density of nutrition from that place. Literally skim the cream off of that and bring it to the animals. Well, that is what confined animal operations are, CAFOs. Like, it makes sense.
Yeah.
Like, you have this super productive place of no people. Well, you're going to bring the most efficient part of that productivity to where the people and the animals are. But then our hyper focus on efficiency says, well, don't just harvest prairie seeds, harvest one prairie seed. No, don't just harvest one prairie seed, harvest the most efficient prairie seed. Well, you end up with corn, and you can't just do corn because it depletes. So then you end up with soy to like rebalance the nutrients. And all of a sudden, like, the system we have makes a lot of sense, but it has all these externalities that for a while we were able to just ignore and be like, no, this model makes sense. Let's do it. And it worked. And people could be in high density places on the coasts but it has these externalities. So now we're kind of we're rolling it back and like, how do we undo some of this, or do we undo all of it? Do we scrap the whole system, or we still have this challenge? So maybe you take those seed heads and you take them to a lab to create on meat that doesn't involve a feedlot, which is kind of horrific for the animals, not good for the environment where the feedlot is, and you turn it into meat. I don't know all the externalities of a meat growing lab. Those should be highly analyzed in comparison. When you're comparing a meat lab to a feedlot, you got to compare them fully. You can't just say, oh, this doesn't have the death of animals, it's better. Like, you got to really compare them. And then once again, that feedstock, can we grow corn in Iowa in a way that allows for more diversity? Can we grow prairie again? Like the Land Institute in Kansas is trying to figure out, how can we have a diversity of perennial prairie species that we grow together, and all these other wildlife is able to live there as well. And then you harvest the seed heads of that, and then you consume it. So I think there are ways of getting that productivity of the Midwest out to the densely populated places in better ways than we're doing it now.
Mhm.
And then maybe putting it through a meat lab would be better than a capo feedlot, but you'd really have to analyze the whole life cycle on both those things. And we could probably do feedlots in a much better way too. Like, just because they have practices that are environmentally degraded and not great for the animal's health, like we could probably do those better too.
Definitely could do those better.
Yeah. The better and better when you iterate better on those things, I think you end up saying, well, you're shooting towards just pasture raised, pasture finished animals, supplemented with maybe productivity from the Midwest.
So, a recap of marketable options. First, we have industrial beef. It really is the clear loser. High methane. Sorry, loser. Anyways,
Loser. What's
loser.
that? What's that? L7 weenie. Like, oh wait, how they do that? Oh yeah,
Oh,
L7 weenie means a square. Anyways, that's like definitely like a 60s insult. Way back in the day. Don't ask me how I know that. It's probably from The Sandlot.
it's probably from the same part of your brain that knows the Monster Mash or the Monsters theme song.
The Monsters theme song. We got that clarified, everyone, from episode 1. It's been
We should-
clarified.
We should
I'm
probably,
basically-
you should do that on Instagram. You should put something like that on Instagram.
I'm basically a walking encyclopedia for music knowledge. Is
Yeah.
is essentially what we've discovered.
Anyways, industrial beef, the clear loser. Like
Clear loser.
high
Sorry,
methane,
beef.
high water, high cruelty. And on the cruelty of it all, it's not just cows. Like justice for animals, dead ass. Anyways,
Yeah.
next up we have lab produced or just like lab/processed plant meat.
Yeah.
It is a techno fix that reduces methane in land use, but it stays tethered to the industrial high energy grid, which is problematic. Like, okay, now is your energy coming from a renewable source or is it coming from natural gas, coal-fired power plant, etc.? Again, won't get into it. I already got on the soapbox. Third, we have regenerative beef. Now, this is the biological fix. It still has a higher land use footprint, and it still has some of the emissions associated with cows, like it's inherent in
Yeah.
cow,
Yeah.
but it's the only option on this list that actually sequesters carbon and restores biodiversity while producing food.
Yep.
Y'all, seriously though, like on the off meat days, try lentils.
Another
the
lentils
fourth
plug.
option.
Another lentils plug. It's like
It-
I think our diet is just like it needs to be a good mix of like every now and then when you can afford it, it's good regenerative beef, and then you got like
yes.
other plant proteins mixed in there. And fish, like,
Yes.
sustainable fish, whatever. It's a whole nother spiel, but
Well, it's a spiel that we'll get into in a little bit, but just on the if I could take it back to the realm of lentil for a moment. 1 cup of lentils has 18 grams of protein, which is the same as 3 large eggs or 2 ounces of ground beef. And for our fiber maxing babes, it has 16 grams of fiber. Yeah, legumes, they're your friends. And
they're
you know
your
what?
friends.
Let's let Tucker talk to you about why, for him, eating meat and making food choices in general is about connecting deeper with the quote-unquote cycle of life.
I'm totally fine with people eating animals. Like, I wish they didn't, but I don't necessarily think that I think it's for some of us, part of our evolutionary history, and for some people, they either need it or don't, depending on how they were raised. I think and I'm going to use as an example because it is an extreme example, right? It's like, it's great to plant a garden at your house. You absolutely should. I think it's connecting you to the cycle of life, right? Going out and like recognizing that it takes like 120 days to grow a tomato is important thing to learn, right? Oh, there's going to be insects that are going to show up. Oh, I need to manage and pay attention to my soil. Like, what are the earthworms doing? Is it raining tomorrow? What's the weather like? You know, is this the right time of year to plant this? Wow, the days are getting shorter. That's affecting my plants in these ways. These are all ways we can be connecting to the cycle of life. And just the process of like taking a seed and sprouting it is so crucial. There are a lot of people that have never taken a seed and sprouted it. And it's a really incredible act just to like nurture a seed into life. No student left my classroom, whether they were 5 or 15, without knowing how to plant a seed and take care of it and sprout it into the world, right? It's like one of the most important things we can do. So the other thing I want to talk about is coming back to the animal piece is like, if you do eat animals and you want to keep eating them, then my encouragement is you should kill the animals that you're eating. And I'm not saying every time, all the time, but like if you like eating lamb, then find a local butcher or a primitive skills school or a person down the road or a farmer and say, hey, I want to learn how to do this. And go through the experience of looking a live animal in the eyes and going through the process of like, this is what this smells like. This is what this feels like. That's what it means to be connected to the cycle of life. And I can nearly guarantee you when you eat that animal, you will have an experience and a connection to it that you simply cannot have when you go to the grocery store and buy that same lamb in a little package, you know, wrapped in plastic. So I'm pescatarian, like I'm primarily plant-based, but I eat fish. But I like swim around in the ocean and dive 50 feet underwater and spear fish and I kill them, right? And I honor their life, but I go through that process, you know, and that's the reason I do it and the reason I eat them is because I'm like there feeling all those feels, right? That's honestly like the first thing that anyone can do and something that is like universal no matter whether you live in Dubai or Colombia in South America or, you know, New York is like ask yourself those questions and hopefully you will uncover answers about ways you can move in the right direction.
Okay, so what about government intervention here? This is always like the taboo topic. Like, does the government intervene or not? And like, honestly, you hear on both sides being like the people working toward a regenerative future and the people working not toward a regenerative future, toward the industrial monoculture, ag, whatever. Both of them have beef, no pun intended, with government intervention sometimes. Like sometimes government intervention makes regenerative practices way harder.
Yeah.
Impossible, makes it too expensive for a regenerative farmer to actually do anything. And sometimes government intervention just strangles possibilities in the sense that it subsidizes only these industrial practices so that a regenerative farmer could literally never have a chance. So, and, you know, it tends to be the more conservative, like fiscally conservative POV to like not intervene government wise. And then you have issues with like managing resources and emissions and stuff like that. Like, how do we do that? So let's talk about the government intervention with this particular topic of livestock and meat production. Methane digesters are, in fact, heavily subsidized by federal and state governments, particularly in the United States, to reduce methane emissions from livestock manure. But, okay, first, what is that? What are methane digesters? They are specialized systems that break down organic waste, such as manure and food scraps, in an oxygen-free environment using microorganisms. Okay? They produce biogas, methane and carbon dioxide, which is used for renewable electricity, heat, or fuel while creating nutrient-rich fertilizer and reducing odors. So that all sounds positive, right? And like
I'm suspicious. That sounds too good to be true.
Sounds a little too good to be true, right? Well, here is the kicker. There's a danger involved with this. Many critics argue that they actually incentivize factory farms to produce more waste just to get green credits.
I kind of saw that coming, not gonna lie.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, isn't that sick? Anyways.
I mean, well, I just think something like this says a lot about how informed and how deep you need to read between the lines for some of this government intervention. Green credits in the meat industry essentially refers to carbon credits or environmental offsets generated by agricultural practices that are supposed to reduce greenhouse gas emissions or even capture carbon. These credits are used by meat producers to market their products as quote unquote climate smart or climate friendly. Does that sound like greenwashing or what? And by other companies to offset the emissions generated by their facilities and livestock. We will get into the greenness, so to speak, of these credits later in this season when we do a policy deep dive. But for now, just know that there are controversies and greenwashing concerns. Many critics argue that these credits are often not reliably calculated and overstate the climate benefits while ignoring the high methane emissions generated by the livestock themselves. So I would like to ask the question, after hearing all of that about methane digesters and the millions going into subsidies for those, and factory farms getting green credits for implementing that. Like a factory farm getting green credits already just is wrong, okay? So I want to ask the question, is there any money going to the farmers who aren't making a mess in the first place? This should be the question, and this is where the Cows Act comes into play. I have no idea if they named it that on purpose, but I think it's
probably
cute. The Cows Act, federal level implementation, federal level act that stands for converting our waste sustainably. Now, the Cows Act was designed to level the playing field for smaller pasture-based farms. It was introduced by a bipartisan group of legislators, primarily led by Senator Alex Padilla, a Democrat from California, in the Senate, and Representative Jim Costa, another Democrat from California. And traditionally, federal subsidies for methane reduction have heavily favored methane digesters because digesters are incredibly expensive, often costing millions, as I said.
That's crazy.
And they only work, I mean, this is the other thing about methane digesters, they only work for massive industrial factory farms. So, and with, a factory farm with thousands of cows in one place, which is problematic when we're talking about all of the elements of agriculture that we're speaking about in this season, right?
Yeah.
So this just offers yet another incentive for industrial level factory farms. The Cows Act creates a federal grant program to fund non-digester manure management. So this is kind of a way to counter this incentivizing of factory farms. Yeah. And the key practices funded include composting, which we spoke about in our last episode, turning manure into nutrient-dense soil amendment, solid separation, removing solids from liquids to prevent anaerobic decomposition.
Ooh.
And pasture-based systems, helping farmers transition cows out of barns and those barns, not even the right word. We're talking like those. Have you guys ever seen those documentaries of like those factory farms where it's just like what are they called? The confinement? CAFOs?
Confined animal feeding operations.
Yeah. Confined animal feeding operations, aka CAFOs, where it's just this guys, if you ever seen one of these, it's horrific.
Honestly, if you want to be scared straight into being like vegetarian or vegan, honestly, that could do it.
So the Cows Act is essentially saying we shouldn't just subsidize the cleanup of factory farms. We should subsidize the farmers who aren't creating the mess in the first place. However, as of early 2006, the legislation had not been passed, shocker, as a standalone law. I mean, I'm sure the lobbying power against this is so strong. I mean, Monsanto
Yeah.
and Bayer are probably all over that. Has not been passed as a standalone law, but has been reintroduced and included as part of the 2026 Farm Bill negotiations.
Yeah, that's really interesting. As someone taking administrative law, very, very interesting. But let's look at California, the place I currently call home, as a case study. And I'm not saying that California is perfect. We talked about some of the problems that California's state legislation has on farmers during our interview with Blue Marble Acres, which is not super relevant to this conversation, so we're not going to include it, but we'll include it in a later episode. Anyways, case study, California. The AMMP, which stands for Alternative Manure Management Program, is a state-level legislation currently active in California. Now, California has long been the testing ground for more progressive, more innovative, I'll just call it climate and environment policy. And this is no different. California is the testing ground for policies here when it comes to livestock management. The AMMP is a real-world functioning version of what the Cows Act wants to do nationally. Super cool. How does it work? Well, managed by the California Department of Food and Agriculture, the CDFA, AMMP provides grants of up to, I think, like $750,000, which is not
It's not a lot.
It's not a lot, but it's not nothing, to dairy and livestock producers to implement climate-smart manure practices. And I will also say $750,000 is not a lot, but if your goal is to have smaller farm holders, that can be really substantial. So, again, putting some of these things together and perspective-wise. So why is it quote-unquote alternative? It is specifically for projects that do not involve a digester. And the impact of AMP is one of the, or AMMP, I'm not really sure which one it is, but y'all
I
get
like
the gist.
AMP.
AMP. The impact of AMP is one of the most cost-effective climate programs in the country. It reduces methane at a much lower cost per ton than digesters, and it provides the side benefits like better air quality and compost for local crops. The comparison here is that while California also funds digesters through the DDRDP program, I will not be giving you the name for that acronym. AMP is
Not important.
No, the AMP is the hero, if there is a title, a generous title maybe, for regenerative advocates because it supports biological diversity rather than industrial infrastructure. And to the people who will complain about our taxpayer dollars, no doubt, I know you're in the audience. I see you. I see you. I do see you. Reminder that government money is being spent on this sector already, and also our money is supposed to be spent. I'm paying taxes so that it can be spent. The government is not here to make money off of me. Spend my tax dollars.
Spend it on the people, though. This is the thing, right? If the government is spending this money on methane digesters, millions, by the way, for factory farms that are not producing high-quality food, that are making you sick, that are giving us literal chronic illnesses, and are environmentally destructive, why not put the tax? I want my taxpayer dollars to pay to keep me healthy and well.
In fact, I'd pay more taxes if I knew.
Hot take.
If you were
Hot
I'm going to
take.
tax you X% more to do this regenerative thing, this thing that feeds
Yep.
more people, this thing that gives us better school systems. Cool. What am I earning it for anyways? It's cheaper to live when we have a better public funded system anyways.
Well,
Off my soapbox I go.
Aaron says something really interesting about that.
Like I said, I always come back economically to like you're situated in a big cultural pot of what's the cheapest. Like you can have someone who's the president of an environmental nonprofit shop at Costco and say, I got the best, cheapest deal on these chicken thighs the other day. I'm like, how can you say it was the best deal? And how is it that cheap? There's no such thing as cheap. But it's so culturally ingrained that even people who consider themselves environmental, like superstars get caught up in that. At the cash register is the point at which you say, I got a good deal. And to be more truthful, you would say, I paid very little for what I think the value I got is at the cash register, period. Like the product that is brought to me at that price has other costs, right? The hidden costs of that product. What would be really cool is if that when you went to the store and you saw a diversity, say you're at the meat counter and you had all these different types of meat production. You had, conventional ground beef that the animal spent half its life in a feedlot. You have feedlot finished beef that spent most of his life out in pasture and then the last month was on feedlot grain. You have a grass-fed animal that spent a lot of its life on grass and a lot of its life in a feedlot with hay, which is still considered grass-fed. And then you have grass raised, pasture raised, and finished animals. They're all there. They all have the financial cost associated with those operations. But then they also have, this one is $5 a pound, but there's also an IOU to your grandkids right here that is a $6 a pound IOU. Because IOU for the environmental problems that you're going to have to deal with down the line. So the total cost at the till is $5 per pound plus $6 per pound for all these other externalities that aren't being considered now that my grandkids are going to have to deal with.
To understand why cattle, specifically, are the secret weapon of regenerative agriculture, this requires us to stop viewing them as meat machines and start viewing them as biological accelerators. This is perhaps the most profound thing that I'm going to say on this entire episode. And before we continue, yes, we still need to gravitate towards eating less meat. But for this system to work, there really is no way around that. We can't avoid that. But just hear us out. Lex, can you break it down for our listeners simply?
Yes, I've never been known as one for brevity, but let me give it a go. So, in an industrial system, the way we manage and produce cows and livestock is problematic because the animals are concentrated in one place called feedlots. Feedlots lead to poor environmental conditions, mistreatment of the animals, also disease. You have to have them on a lot of medications. And frankly, it's just bad quality meat products because these animals are pumped with antibiotics and hormones to sustain these terrible conditions. It also, I have been told, makes them taste worse, which
It does. It's
yeah,
so true.
it's because of this, not necessarily the antibiotics and hormones of it all,
The
but
stress.
I guess it is the hormones, the stress. Yeah. Anyways, it's that simple. Cows have a nervous system.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Have
They
we
have-
been demoralizing? I wanted to say dehumanizing. I mean, they're not humans, but like,
But
who
also,
would have
like,
thought? Who would've thought?
That's a whole other can of worms, but dehumanizing, I would say, actually is the appropriate word here.
Yeah.
Anyways, they also have a lymphatic system. If it's constantly stressed out, the imbalances are going to translate into its body, its physical body, the part that we consume.
Thank you.
It's
Thank
meat and it's
you.
milk. So
Thank
in a
you.
regenerative system, cows are instead a tool to mimic the great migratory herds of bison that originally built the world's most fertile soils. And here's Aaron speaking a bit about his experience using cattle as a biological accelerator rather than an industrial meat machine.
well, I started in row crop agriculture, vegetables and some grains and fruits. Kept on going in row crops, thinking that I would eventually start and own my own operation. And while I was working towards that, I started to learn. Oh, actually, I came back to Marin County and I went and lived and worked on my family ranch. And with this mentality of like, wow, look at all this space. I could grow so many vegetables here, and to be honest, at the time I was vegetarian as a ecologically motivated choice. And so I was actually pretty down on the ranching that I was surrounded by and the animal agriculture, because I just, in my mind, I was like, I can grow so much more nutrition for people than they can in that broad acreage. And I learned by living in and with and working for these ranchers that wasn't necessarily true. Like California, coastal California specifically, has limited freshwater resources. It has unique soils that do not grow crops well. It has a lot of topography that you don't want to level and plant stuff on. And if you till up on a hillside, which historically had been done, you have a lot of erosion and loss of topsoil. And so the picture got more nuanced, and I started to understand that I was going to need to be using diesel to, and put up fencing and control the water that was otherwise would have been in a creek going for the salmon and all this wildlife, and creating a lot of evaporation on the land in a season that, typically wouldn't have water being irrigated everywhere in our climate. And I was also at that point pretty tired of fighting every deer and gopher and bird and all these things. And I was just this combined learning about how cattle ranchers, the livestock they're working with, go out on their own energy that they ate the day before, and they walk out into a much more wild landscape, harvest the solar energy that's out there and bring it back at night, and at the time that they're going to be harvested themselves, they've done that all on their own solar buck,
Yeah.
they're spreading nutrient laden moisture around the landscape. They're not tilling it, and in and amongst them live all the wild ecology that wild's probably the wrong word, but the ecology that I also cared so deeply about. So I was like, wow, this is an integrated system of management that also allows humans to have, materials like leather and all the products that come from cattle parts and food. And they don't have to fight the gophers. They don't have to fight the deer. Like, all those things have a place. And so the deeper ecologist in me was like, I don't want to fight all these things just to have a human product. Like, I want to be able to work with all of them. And so my dream agricultural production operation started to evolve into a place where when you came to my quote farm or ranch or whatever you want to call it, you'd look out across it and not be able to tell that it was an agricultural operation.
Here is how hooves and manure actually can heal the earth. Number 1, we've got 4 points here, so just bear with us. But the first one is the biological drill. Okay, so hoof action. In a healthy in a healthy regenerative practice like AMP grazing, which is adaptive multi-paddock grazing, cattle are moved frequently, again, to mimic what's the
Bison.
word, like a bison, migratory patterns. It's considered like kind of like breaking the crust. Their hooves break up. I don't know if I'm saying hooves right. Do you say hooves
It's
or
perfect.
hooves? Okay.
Potato.
Their hooves break up the hard packed capping on the soil surface, and this allows air and water to actually reach the roots of the plants. It also correlates to massive water retention because the soil is no longer a hard brick. It acts like a sponge. Regenerative grazing can increase a field's water infiltration by hundreds of %, preventing runoff and preventing floods.
And if I might just add, the key here is moving them around and not having them huddled in one spot, because you might be saying, you ladies just told me that having them in one spot makes the soil too compact. Yeah, we did. And we stand by that. You can't have them in one place the whole time. The idea is that you're moving them around so that behind the cows comes the grass that will
Yep.
also help aerate the soil. And then, anyways, just
No,
putting that out
exactly.
there.
Exactly. Thank you. Thank you very much. This second component of how cattle's hooves and manure can heal the earth is the mobile digester. So what we would consider nutrient cycling. Cows are essentially walking fermentation vats. It's an instant fertilizer. They take low-value carbon, like dried grass and weeds, and process it through their forestomachs. Then they deposit it back onto the soil as high-value microbe-rich fertilizer, aka manure and urine. This is not dinner conversation. Hope you're not listening while you're eating a meal. The microbe inoculation, a cow's gut is teeming with beneficial bacteria, and as they graze, they seed the pasture and the very biology needed to break down organic matter and turn it into topsoil. Okay?
Yeah.
So that's the microbe inoculation element of all of this. Third way hooves and manure can heal the earth: the pumping effect. This is, classic carbon sequestration. This is the magic, okay, of regenerative meat. When a cow bites the top of a grass blade, the plant undergoes a stress response. Exactly. The plant undergoes a stress response, and to survive, the plant sheds some of its roots. Those dead roots stay underground and turn into stable soil carbon. The plant then pumps sugars, aka liquid carbon, into the soil to feed fungi so it can grow back faster. And here's the cycle. By grazing the grass down, then moving the cows away, as Lexi said, to let it rest, you are essentially pumping atmospheric carbon into the ground over and over again. Did you guys catch that? We can literally force soil into the ground by using
carbon.
cattle in this way. Sorry. Jeez. Thank you. Soil keeps the carbon in the ground by using the cattle in this way. And finally, the natural pest control and weed management of it all. Instead of using petroleum-based herbicides, regenerative farmers could use cattle. Cows eat when they like, and they trample the rest. This trampled layer acts as a natural mulch, keeping the soil cool and suppressing weeds. Some farmers run cattle through a field after a harvest or before planting a cover crop. The cattle clean up the waste, kill off pests, and prep the bed for the next crop without even using a single chemical, a single spray, a single drop of toxins to make that happen. Wild. Absolutely wild. Here is Aaron describing what carbon capture of regenerative ranching realistically could look like.
Well, I'll start with saying that it is, as far as an industry goes, it's a new industry and they're still working out a lot of kinks. The business people in the industry are pushing it like any other business, side of stuff would be, is to move fast and be the front of the industry to garner the biggest portion of it. It's just a economic model that people are following. But it turns out they're moving faster than the science is supporting. If a scientific report coming out of Nebraska says that managing cattle in this way on the land improves soil carbon content in a long-term way, and someone says, oh, wow, we should start a, carbon credit program in California where I live to capture on people who capture the value of the carbon being stored in the same situation in California. But you can't say, oh, because it worked in Nebraska, the same thing applied in California is going to work the same way and should be valued the same way. And the science to say how it should be valued or if it's working takes more time than it takes for someone to start a business online and start trying to sell credits to companies. So that is happening. But people are seeing that and becoming aware that like they need to dig deeper. Some people are, so it'll level out probably in the long run. But what I do see our part in that whole deal is that it all comes kind of back to diversity and productivity. Like the photosynthetic productivity is the engine that drives the carbon transfer from the air into the soil. And that engine is more efficient at doing all the things that it does when there's a diversity of species at play. So once again, when we're focused on managing for a diversity of plant species, we're inherently supporting a system that's going to be most efficient at sequestering carbon to whatever degree it can. And then also, when we're looking at the plants on an individual basis, on all the different species that are present here, within that diversity, we're trying to both skim some energetic resource off the top, turn that into beef that then is becoming a product for humans. But we're also trying to understand those plants that evolved with being grazed. They evolved with grazing in a way that, like, without grazing, they are less productive. They're less healthy. They can't play their role as well. But each plant may be different, So if you want to treat all the diversity of plants as best you can, it can't all happen necessarily at the exact same time. Like, we haven't really figured that out, but like we've learned a lot about how grasses grow and how they feed the soil in all the various ways. Like they feed the soil when their leaves and stems fall down and touch the soil surface, they're providing certain services, and that carbon can get cycled into the soil, but a lot of it can then get cycled back out. There are roots. When they get grazed and if they slough off, that is a direct functional carbon input to the soil. But then there's also living roots that are exuding liquid carbon into the soil, and that is adding carbon to the soil. And then there's all the interactions with the soil microbiota that we are still trying to understand. But basically, we're trying to understand how best to support the plants. And there's a lot of them. And I think the grazing world has focused largely on grass for the past 30 years and knows pretty little about how to support the broadleaf species in our prairies. In our prairies, there's a lot of broadleaf, both annual and perennial species. I think the focus has been given to grass and trees. We've noticed, a missing tree aspect, especially if you're shooting for having savannas. There's a lot of grasslands without trees. There's a lot of forests without grass. So if you're shooting for savanna, you want to bring trees into your grasslands and grass back into your forests. And so the focus has been on grass phenology and supporting grass growth, and how do you support trees to reestablish themselves. But there's all these other species in there, geophytes that grow from bulbs in the ground, and annual wildflowers and perennial wildflowers. And how do we graze each of those to support it the best over time? In our efforts there to support all this diversity as best as we can, I think we will secondarily be creating the most carbon capture that this ecosystem can create without even really focusing on it. In fact, just focusing on carbon capture is a myopic approach. And I think our approach of looking at the whole ecosystem as a functioning integrated system and trying to support it all as best we can is going to get more returns than just focusing on the carbon.
What I'm hearing, Ari, is that we can eat meat and cool the planet. Technically, yes, right? If
Technically,
the
yes.
cow is a tool for soil health rather than a unit of production, but we also must repeat, we collectively must lower the cattle for consumption demand. So
Yeah.
that doesn't mean that all of a sudden everyone just goes out and starts buying regenerative meat at the same capacity that you're currently eating meat. Still need to have that go down.
Yep.
So if the model is adapted, we can still eat meat sometimes, maintain
Yep.
a happy topsoil to grow more nutritious crops, and help keep that carbon in the ground. In the industrial model, the one that we're currently working with on mass scale, the cow is just an end product, a commodity. In the regenerative model, the cow is a fellow employee, if you will, a catalyst even. Her job isn't just to grow beef and produce milk. Her job is to engineer the soil so that an entire ecosystem, the birds, the bugs, the bees, and the crops, can actually thrive. Herself included too. Like, who hasn't seen the milk that advertises happy cows, for God's sakes?
No, literally. It's we keep saying the word paradigm shift, but it's so relevant here, because if you transition to this regenerative model and everything is working with each
nature,
other, with nature,
as it was intended.
It is actually insane the kind of quality of food we can also produce for ourselves, but also like the ethics of it all. It is about the ethics too, like what a better quality of life.
Yeah,
that
absolutely.
That cute little cow is going to be living in that system.
Yeah. And again, we've been harping on this, but we don't want it to get lost or be overlooked. It is an inescapable fact that the world, me, Ari, and you listening included, must consume less meat. By 2036, global emissions from livestock must drop by 61% in order to align with the goals of the Paris Climate Agreement. 61%. So if you want to make it a personal goal to eat 61% less meat this year, I actually think that's very doable. Maybe we'll post a little bit of math of how you can make that happen. But just, again, in order to accomplish that goal for the Paris Agreement, the number of farmed animals must start dropping now, today.
Yep.
And how do we as individuals influence that right now? Simple. With our own personal demand.
If we can leave you with one message today, it's that it's not about meat versus no meat. It's really about ecological integration versus resource extraction. Support seasonal, local, regenerative producers. Check the AMMP and Cows Act status actively. Here are Tucker's suggestions for making better individual food choices.
I mean, first off, I think everybody should eat as local and as seasonal as possible, and support the farmers and the producers in the community where they live first, right? I mean, we have a huge issue in this country around affordability, right? And that real food in the I mean, especially in the United States, but also around the world, but especially in the United States right now, people are being hit from all sides by increases from tariffs, by agricultural disruptions, by extractive capitalism raising prices, by the monopolization of our food system. So I want to say this in the context of like that it is an economic privilege to be able to afford and eat really well in the United States. And in some other parts of the world, it's not as big of a deal. Like in Italy, it's just like the quality of food, like the floor is like so much higher, right? And and that said, like I think this comes back to like connecting to the cycle of life of like it is more to me, it is more connected to the cycle of life to say, oh, I'm going to go to the farmer's market than it is to go to the grocery store. It's more connected to the cycle of life to say, oh, like I could buy meat from this farmer that I know or that's part of my local community, right? Um, Likewise, it's more connective to buy cacao from Imlakesh than it is to buy like a Hershey's bar or, some of the other like questionable practices going on with cacao, for example.
Here are some ways you can start making changes today. We've got 4 of them. We like 4s today. So, first, the quality over quantity rule. Think of it as an 80-20 pivot. We know that regeneratively sourced meat is more expensive, but here is why it's worth it. You can stop buying volume and start buying density.
Thank
Our
you.
challenge to you this week, I didn't come up with these all on my own, so thank you. Our challenge to you this week is the 80-20 swap. Take the money you would spend on 5 days of industrial feedlot meat and spend the exact same budget on 1 or 2 meals of high-quality, regeneratively grazed alternatives, whether it's beef, chicken, pork, I don't care.
Yep.
You are getting 400% more nutrients and you're funding the healing of soil instead of its depletion.
Yep.
Second, know your farmer. This is the relationship shift. The more familiar you are with where your food comes from, the better off you will be. It has a plethora of benefits, eating seasonally being one of the top, knowing that your animals were raised ethically being maybe second top. This will also kill the middleman, respectfully. This week, skip the supermarket meat aisle entirely. Go to, there's websites like eatwild.com or Regeneration International and find one producer within 100 miles of your home. Send them an email or visit them on their day at the farmer's market and ask them one question. How are you managing your soil? When you know the farmer, you know the future. Ari, will you tell us about the last 2?
Love to. We're gonna bring it back to one of the like unexpected stars of today's show, and that's lentils. The third suggestion that we're going to offer you guys today is Lentil Monday, or insert day here, but it's a plant forward thinking, and this I like to think of this as like eating like a soil builder. Okay, for 2 nights a week, swap meat for a soil fixer alternative. What do I mean by that? Lentils and beans don't just fuel you, honey. They fix nitrogen into the ground while they grow. So use those off nights to save up for like a really good pasture raised steak on the weekend. It's not just about it's not about being vegan. It's about being an ecological realist.
I like that a lot.
Thank you. The fourth and final suggestion we're going to leave you all with today is do a little policy pulse. We need systemic action now. If we have not made it clear, this is a now problem, people. You don't just change your plate, okay? Change the law. Participate. If you're fired up about the $20 billion in subsidies going to industrial corn and soy, do something about it. Tell your representative, mention the Cows Act, tell them you want your tax dollars supporting alternative manure management, not industrial methane digesters, okay? Food is politics. So it's time we all start acting like constituents.
This season of Hotel Earth 360 was written and produced by Ariana Helvai and Alexandria Moorhead with contributions from Perry Kaler. Interviews featured in this episode include Aaron Gilliam, grazing specialist and land steward at Sonoma Mountain Institute, and Tucker Garrison, co-founder of Imlakesh Organics. This episode was edited by Bob. This episode would not be possible without the profound shared knowledge of Indigenous communities. Find us on Substack and YouTube, at HotelEarth360.com, and wherever you listen to podcasts.